musicians can use Hangouts on Air to enhance their online visibility, grow their audience, and engage with fans. Welcome to the Visual Content Marketing Show. I'm your host, Krishna Day, and the Visual Content Marketing Show explores how to integrate visual content into your digital marketing and communications plans, including trends, technologies, and practical tips. So I am delighted that you're able to join me here today. As I said, my name is Krishna Day, and I have two guests with me today. And my guests are Sue Aston and Phil Aston. You might have seen us together on events previously because they host a number of shows, and they also host a great show where they've invited me in as a guest for a number of episodes. But today we're going to talk about a very specific area of using Hangouts for music. And I really hope that if you know musicians who've been wondering how they grow their audience, how they can even use Hangouts to actually bring in new streams of revenues, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So Sue and I and Phil were all based in Europe, so if you're watching from North America or elsewhere in the world, we're delighted to speak to you. I'm here in Ireland, and Phil and Sue are in the UK. Sue is a really talented violinist. In fact, they've got a very talented family in terms of all being musicians, and she's been experiencing and using digital platforms to support her career for some time. She's got a tremendous website. I really encourage you to take a look at it later. We'll put links into the event page for you to check it out. And she's very fortunate. I'm sure he thinks he's fortunate as well to be married to Phil. And Phil is a wonderful photographer. So again, you'll see great photographs of Sue, which I'm guessing that Phil took over on the site. But he also is a digital communications person. He has been hosting Hangouts. He has actually helped his clients in terms of increase their online visibility. But also what is really wonderful about their partnership is that he's been the producer and the technical person behind their music show. And if you've joined me for previous episodes of the show, one of the things you'll know is we've sometimes looked at case studies. And I had a few musicians talk to me about using Hangouts. In fact, one of my clients actually is an organization where you learn to do music scoring and film scoring. So they had a really high-end produced Hangout that they did, and they've been in Hangouts since. And that's been great to see. But not everybody has a studio to be in. And so what we're going to talk about today is actually learning about the journey that Sue and Phil have gone on. We're going to learn about what you could do if you were a musician. And I'm really excited about how you could actually turn Hangouts into a stream of revenue. So welcome to the show, both of you. I'm delighted that you're here. And so perhaps, Sue, you might want to tell us a little bit more about, you're the star of the show today. You're the person in front of stage. Phil and I are just kind of behind the scenes here. So, Sue, perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about your profession and what you might have done in terms of also promoting your business. I don't know if you call it a business. What do you call it if you're a musician?
Yes, music business.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, I started off, I trained at music college and played with professional orchestras, but found that I didn't really like the travelling aspect of it. And having a young family as well, I didn't like the antisocial travelling, being away from home, that sort of thing. And that was always in the back of my mind, that I enjoyed performing but didn't like the upheaval of it all. And so really, for me, Hangouts On Air are perfect because I can perform at home whenever I want to, and it fits in around my lifestyle. So that's perfect for me as a musician, and I think that's a very new thing for musicians to be able to do that, really.
Yeah, I think where we came up with the idea earlier this year, so not that long ago really, Genius Loci is our internet business, but it started off as a little record company in 1999. Because we realised the technology was available then to press your own CDs and do your covers and all the rest of it, and you could sell stuff online. So that's how we started. It was only because we we did a fairly good website that other people asked us to do more websites, and then people said, how come your website's always in the top 10 of Google? So we ended up going into SEO. But so over the last kind of 14 years, we've tried, as the music business has fragmented and changed, we've adapted to everything that's come along. But we were running out of options is how we looked at it. And then we saw Hangouts on Air as a way of broadcasting to a brand new audience, but breaking through the barriers of Facebook and Twitter into going across borders. And
that's right.
Instead of playing to 12 people in a local church and hopefully one of them or two of them liked it and they bought a CD, this was a way of seeing people in different countries, because Sue's always sold CDs around the world. You'd sell a few to Toronto in Canada, or one to Brazil, or three to Italy, but you couldn't afford to go and play to 3 people
Sadly
in Italy.
Not.
But maybe if you got all those people in those countries all together in a Hangout On Air, all of a sudden there was a way for people to see Sue Aston play live.
Yeah, my music videos, I was very lucky when we moved to Cornwall, because a film producer spotted the fact that I'd just created a new CD. It was my second CD. And there was a film producer down who specialised in music production.
Yeah.
Used to be on the
Tube on
Channel 4. And luckily he chose me, saw me in the newspaper, and made a DVD, didn't he?
Yeah.
And we got it on telly. We got it shown. It was about 5 times a day for several years on Sky TV. It was on Classic FM TV, and then that turned into the O Music classical music channel. And so for several years that was great. I had lots of sales, but it was mainly Europe, and I thought I wanted really to get to America and the Far East, because I just feel as though I have so much in common with people everywhere that it was a shame that you know, how was I going to get there? So for me, Hangouts On Air has been the perfect way of doing that.
So it sounded simple.
Sounded simple.
Sue, you're known as the coastal composer.
Yeah.
Tell us how that came about. And also, I know that we've got lots of people here who are watching. Clearly, you are the big draw tonight, so I know a lot of your fans are actually here watching, so thank you, everybody. But how did the name of the coastal composer come about? And tell people who don't know your work, because you're not going to be playing live here. We'll put links to some of your shows a little later on in your content later on about the style of your music.
Well, I'm classically trained, but I've always listened to a great mixture of different music, from punk rock to rock music to Celtic music and everything in between. And when we moved to Cornwall really because all my composing was inspired by the Cornish landscape and all the myths and legends of this amazing place. So we were very brave when we uprooted ourselves from a big city with 2 very young children and moved to Cornwall. And I suppose the title Coastal Composer just came to my mind because we're always walking the coastal path and being inspired by the sea and the landscape. And I thought, well, I'm a coastal composer because I live so near to the coast, and that's where all my inspiration is from. And then it occurred to me really that all these times that I'm going out on trips, just walking around and being inspired, it would be a good idea to turn it into a sort of musical diary. And that's really what I'm doing now, working on my project, The Diary of a Coastal Composer, which I'm really launching on Patreon.
Yeah.
Which is the best platform really to support musicians now, is to subscribe just a small amount of money every month to support our work, because it's just very difficult otherwise to kind of fund it really. With downloads don't really accumulate a great deal of money at all.
We're leaping ahead in respect to, instead of doing a traditional CD release with 12 tracks on and writing those 12 tracks and recording those 12 tracks, and then 18 months later it pops out. We've decided that with more and more people working on smartphones and mobile devices, they'll probably want to just be in touch with a musician or artist they like, so that as Sue creates a new piece of work, they have it on their device and they can listen to it, they can absorb it or read about it or watch it. And then the next one comes along, and then the next one comes along. So it's like
regular, really.
So it's like a
ongoing
subscription to something that you want to support, and that's the business model I think we're moving towards.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Patreon for a moment, because I know some people may have not have come across it.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to use that as a platform, and how does it work?
Well, Patreon, the very name Patreon, it's all to do with patronage. And back in the classical era, composers such as Mozart, that's how they earned their living, really, was, well, usually from things like a prince or a queen or someone of royal descent sponsoring them to create music. But nowadays it's a bit like crowdfunding, where a lot of people get together, but they support you on an ongoing basis, and just give a very small amount of money, but kind of do it regularly so that it accumulates, and then you're able to just continue doing your musical projects. And there's lots of artistic people on there too. It's not just musicians, but it occurred to me a few years ago that that would be a way forward, because CD sales across the world for everybody have massively declined, and it's all downloads now, but musicians only make something like 0.0001%, 1p, was it on Spotify? I mean, it's just a terrible way really for musicians to try and earn a living. So it occurred to me that some sort of method of subscribing to me to support me would be the way forward. And luckily, Patreon has popped up, and this is the platform where people can do that.
Yeah, and in return you get lots of different rewards for videos, brand new audio tracks, all sorts of things. So we looked at Pledge and Kickstarter and stuff like that, but that was more towards specific end game projects.
One album.
But this is something that's ongoing. So you're part of the journey. Sue did a Hangout On Air the other week where someone said it was that they liked the idea of walking. They were almost as if by doing this they were walking alongside Sue along the coastal path and being part of what she saw and what she heard. And I think that's the kind of image we're trying to get across.
So maybe in a little later on we can talk about how you can Patreon with your Hangouts, how you promote it that way, because obviously that's going to be a way of you having a new stream of revenue, and also there's some other exciting things that I know you're doing with Hangouts. But let's step back for a moment for those people who are watching this and they are musicians. And before we went live on the show today, we were just talking about this is great technology. It isn't always perfect. Sometimes we can have glitches. We're lucky that we can do a live talk show in terms of all the ones that you've done, Phil, that you've hosted, all the ones I've hosted. But when you actually then start to mix music into it, there's a lot of other variables. So perhaps, Phil, you can talk to us about the challenges that actually bringing music into a Hangout has presented you with, and how you've overcome that. And I should have said that anybody who's watching this on the event page will probably be taken aback by the photograph that you posted of all the microphones that you have. And don't worry, we're going to post a link to an article later on where Phil has actually talked about behind the scenes and some more on the technical aspects. But let's talk about the challenges from when you started off. You were doing a talk show. I mean, that in itself is challenging enough, and you had guests in. But now you actually want to produce music, and in fact, in some of your shows, you don't have just one musician.
Yeah, we have several. The thing is, if when you're new to Hangouts On Air, you go live and you make sure that your microphone and your camera is set, you might notice there's this thing called voice or studio at the bottom, and the studio setting is for music. You can't just plug your guitar in and play in a Hangout On Air because it will sound horrendous. So you need to use the studio setting. So it all sounds rather simple. So you could use your normal microphone perhaps. But what we learned was very quickly is that yes, you can use the studio setting, but you've got to get the music into the system somehow. And our first port of call was one of these, which is a Yeti, because we saw somebody with a photograph of one on the end of a piano. So we thought that must be what musicians use then. So we gave that a go, and didn't work. But it worked, but not very well. So then we realised we had to do something professional, so we had to get some different microphones, but we needed a mixing desk. So we went for one of these first of all, which is a Behringer 1024 mixing desk, which is because you need to get the music into the system. Now, Sue, being a violinist, makes this far more complicated.
It's the hardest instrument.
even recording studios, when we've done albums with Sue, I've said, oh God, it's a violin. So to record a violin, we've tried the microphone on the violin, we tried different microphones, and we got a reasonable sound, but the issue was that as good as the sound we got, when we did testing, where we recorded, we did like pretend Hangouts On Air, which those of you in Hangout On Air land know what that means. You only invite yourself and you record it and then you watch it back in secret. Every one of those we did, the video froze. The sound was okay, but the video just kept stopping and starting. And we asked people like Tom Rolfson, David Sante, what was going on, and they said, oh, it's your bandwidth problem. But we got 8 megabytes per second upload speed here in Cornwall, so we thought that can't be the issue. But then we realised that the Hangout On Air itself can only cope with so much audio going up the tube. It's nothing to do with your computer. It was actually the Hangout On Air technology. So we found out that if you downgraded the video bandwidth, so everybody comes a little bit softer around the edges, the audio was given more room to breathe. And that's how we started. If you go to sueaston.com and look at the Sue Aston show archive tab, if you watch the shows in order of them in historical order, you'll notice how furry they were around the edges to start with, although the sound was good. But we also then realised that you can't use blue snowballs or Yetis for this kind of thing. So we started to use things like this is a Shure SM57 microphone, which is one of the best instrument microphones you can buy. These are about £110 or about $150. You need to buy a good microphone stand as well. They come with freebies, but they're not very good. And we tried that, and it was okay, but as Tom Rolfson pointed out when we did some of the early shows, that Hangout On Airs are very harsh with the EQ. So although it sounds warm and beautiful maybe going in, what comes out the other end can be quite kind of stark and brittle. So the turnaround for us on one level was this microphone, which is a Biodynamic 360, which is used by orchestras and all sorts of people in studios, and it's fantastic. This is about $650, I think, in the States, so it's not a cheap one. And you'll notice when you watch some of Sue's early shows, you can see amps behind it, you can see microphones everywhere. Now when you watch Sue Aston shows, you can't really see anything. That's because apart from cake. That's because this microphone sits up near the ceiling behind Sue, pointing downwards. It's called a ribbon mic. It's got like a double 8 figure in how it sees the sound. It's hypersensitive, and then that goes into the mixing desk, where we add the reverb, where we get that beautiful sound we get. Then, when we were using guitars, because that microphone is so sensitive, it picks up everything. So the reason why you can't see guitar amps in the background of our shows anymore is because they're 20 feet away in another room, facing the wall, so that the microphone in front of them can't be picked up by microphone A. And then when we're using me on guitar, my amplifier is in the hallway in another room, and so all of those signals are then sent through the mixer. The mixer then goes into the computer, but then it has to go into some other software, which for us is Logic Pro, or you could use GarageBand, and then from there it goes into the Hangout On Air, and then we use a Boosteroo headphone amp, which then feeds a link back into the mixer. So what I do, I can hear the sound that's coming out of the Hangout On Air to the audience. So it means that I can balance the sound as people are hearing it, no matter what they're on. So that sounds fab. I know, it sounds great. So we've got all sorts of microphones. Oh, and for vocals, we use a Shure SM58, which is probably one of the finest vocal mics. And in fact, for a lot of our business HOAs now, we use this rather than the Snowball. It's only because I've shown you the mixer I haven't used that, because the sound quality is so warm and natural. The issue is with using mixers is that that's a 4-channel mixer. Those 4 channels just end up going into one discrete channel into the Hangout On Air. So that although I can mix it live, I cannot do anything with it after the event. So we have to do like sound checks before we go live. Now with traditional Hangouts On Air, Most people are told to turn up an hour before, make sure your lower thirds are all right and everything else. With music ones, you need at least 2 hours. You really do, because things happen. Gremlins are around, and you don't want to be freaking out, turning up at 1/4 past the hour when you're going live on the next 45 minutes and suddenly something doesn't work. So that's tradition how we do it. We do a live sound check, we record it and we watch it back to make sure the video is not stuttering. We've noticed, and we don't know whether this is because we've paid for additional bandwidth where we are in the UK, that we can now broadcast in HD video and HD audio. We've got 18 megabytes per second upload speed now, but we were told originally that it doesn't matter how much upload speed you've got, the Hangout On Air cannot cope with too much audio bandwidth, but we've noticed it can now handle it. So we don't know whether that's a universal thing or whether it's because we've got the additional bandwidth ourselves. So that's something that's different. But we always, when we go live, and it's not because we're looking for compliments, you'll notice that in all of our shows we're saying, how does it sound? And it's nice to see people say it sounds great and it sounds brilliant.
You don't know.
Because we've got a rough idea what it sounds like, but we don't know exactly, because the EQ and the guitars sound nicely balanced in my headphone ears doing the mixing, but outside, if someone's listening on a big stereo or their iPhone, it's helpful when the audience say, can you just turn the voice up a little? Or so you have to. So that's the other thing, is remembering, and this is why it's a bit kind of staggered really. Once you finish playing live, you then have to change your setting from studio to voice. If you don't, then no one can hear you. And then when you've done your introductions and you're going back to playing music, you have to change your settings back to studio and switch voice off. And so there are things you have to remember all the time. So I know that in traditional Hangouts On Air you have people helping with comment trackers, and people feel safer having more than one person. Doing a music Hangout On Air, it would be very, very difficult to try and attempt any of this on your own. It really would be, because you've also got the comment tracker and your overlays, but you've also got to be changing settings backwards and forwards and mixing, because each track we do, if it's solo violin, it's a totally different setup on the mixer than guitar and violin, or two guitars and vocals. Each one of those is a different setting on the mixer. So there is a lot to think about.
Well, I know that the people watching the show today are already saying, wow, this sounds complicated. I really appreciate you taking us through this, because people may not understand actually what goes in and the hours of planning and testing that have got you to where you are now, but the fact that for every show you still have to plan so much in advance. Let's take it then, Sue gets an invitation to play at a venue nearby, and there's a suggestion that you then run that as a Hangout On Air. What would you then need to consider if you actually start to take it? Because you've obviously worked out certain things, and there's lots of other variables that affect sound, such as temperature.
Yeah, that's true.
and other things. But then if you go into a different venue, there's a number of other things you've got to take into consideration. What would you do then, Phil, and also yourself, Sue, around getting that sound check? Or would you just say, no, we wouldn't do a live broadcast?
I think we could do that. I mean, it's like when we've appeared on Chef Dennis's show, or different shows where we've not actually been hosting, because what I've just described is us generating the Hangout On Air, where we're pressing start broadcast and we're in a sense in control of our environment. We're deciding what's happening. We have, since doing this, been invited onto various other people's shows, and Sue has, where they've asked for a musical segment at the end of the show or in the middle of it, and we weren't sure how that would work, but it just means we have to set everything up as if the whole thing is a music show. So we're using the mixers and the professional microphones all the way through, and then when Sue's done her talking bit, we just switch over to studio sound for that bit, and then we mix the track. We have different settings for voice and music. If we was doing, as your original question, an outside broadcast, in some respects that might be easier, because you're setting it up in a live environment. The only issue I might have is the instrument bleed in the discrete mixing, because there would be some. Whereas the other thing is, and this is, I think, is to do with Hangouts On Air, where in a normal music venue, the mixer, the producer, would take a line out from the back of each amplifier, so they would have a pure sound from the guitars and only have to worry about acoustic instruments like the violin. For whatever reason, on a Hangout On Air, when we've tried to use a line out position on an amplifier, it adds some interference or noise in the Hangout On Air environment, which is picked up by the recording. So we have to mic up each amplifier with an external microphone rather than just having a lead straight out the line out on the back of the amplifier straight into the mixing desk. For whatever reason, we've just noticed that the Hangout On Air itself seems to have an issue with that. If we were recording onto a computer, like normal computer musicians, taking a line out straight into the computer has no problem. But we've just noticed the Hangout On Air itself, and we know for those of us who do business Hangouts On Air, it's a bit funny about stuff. We've just noticed sometimes you get like a buzzing noise or something, or additional background noise that you don't need. And because we're broadcasting to so many different devices and areas, anything that creates any additional noise that we deem as not musical has to be eliminated. And so I think actually doing an outside broadcast would probably be not. I feel quite confident we could do that.
Wow.
Well, before I move on to some of the things I want to talk to you about, Sue, about what difference Hangouts have made to your business, Phil, we're getting lots of technical questions, so I'm going to reel these off to you. Quick fire answers if you can.
I'll have a go.
So my first question for you is, why can't you use studio at the same time, even for talking?
Well, we did that by accident the other week, and it was because I think we'd had a busy day, and it was on the Dan Aston show, and Dan sometimes obviously gets so excited and carried away. He finished the song and just started talking before we had a chance to change back to voice mode. So we just left it to say, well, I thought it sounds okay in the headphones, we'll just leave it. And then within seconds, people started saying in the comment stream, I can't hear Dan anymore, his voice sounds odd, and we realised, and then someone actually said, I think they've left it in studio mode, and it completely reduces the output of the microphones in voice mode. So you do have to change back, and it's not as bad as if you do music on voice mode, it's horrendous, and it's obvious straight away that you've done something terribly wrong. When you leave it on studio mode for the voice, the first thing you notice is how quiet the voice has gone, and it just doesn't sound clear anymore. So you do have to change from one to the other.
Okay, next question. I know Dan plays the guitar. I think you play the guitar as well, Phil. If you just had to manage guitar and voice, what would your setup be?
If it was just guitar and voice, and we weren't doing any, because I'll come to this at a later stage in the show, if we're just doing a normal show, we'd have the mixer, we'd have a SM58 for the voice, and we'd have an SM57 on the guitar. We use an acoustic Marshall amp for the guitar, which is down the other end of the room, and then that is fed into the computer, into ProLogic. And the reason we use ProLogic is so that we can monitor the sound. We only use ProLogic so that the signal comes back through the headphone amp, back so that each musician in the room and me as a producer can hear exactly what's going on.
And the final technical question from the audience for the minute is, how does Phil convert the analog signal from the mic mixer to digital for the Hangout?
That's done automatically. It's a USB mixer, so although it's analog in all its buttons and controls, it goes into a computer where it's converted into a digital output. The downside of that, if there is any at this point in time, is that it doesn't matter how many channels are going in, they only end up as one channel. Well, it goes into its stereo output, but all those channels are just mixed live at that point in time. But the computer does that.
Well, I know there's lots of other great comments on the event page that Sue and Phil will no doubt want to come back and have a look at in terms of really great accolades for the quality of your shows.
Oh,
and so much as we love you, Phil, and all the things that go on behind the scenes, the star of the show, I'm sure, in terms of Sue's show, is actually Sue herself. So, Sue, let's take a look at what Hangouts have actually meant to your business. Has it attracted opportunities to do paid appearances even locally? Has it helped you increase your YouTube subscribers? Or perhaps there's completely other things that it's meant for your business?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly got my music out to the wide world, really, and that was the main thing for me, was to get people to listen to my music from all over the place. When my music videos were on TV, it was just Europe. And it was quite funny. Sometimes people would say, "Oh, I was on holiday in Spain and we always go to the same villa and I always watch you on the music channel." That was quite strange. But yeah, it kind of missed out America and it missed out the Far East. And I thought there has to be a way of tapping into that. So it's been great to get, people to support my music from all over the world. That's been amazing. So yes, subscribers on YouTube have gone up. That's great. I'm guessing downloads have improved, but we don't really get to hear much about how downloads do, really. It's usually like every year you might get a report. It's probably not as great as people think, is it? Downloads.
Yeah, I think downloads are up from, we have various outlets. So Amazon.com, we have downloads from there, as well as physical releases, and CD Baby in America. And obviously there's adverts on the videos on YouTube, and we've had more from there, haven't we? So the interest has gone up.
Definitely.
So because of the significant investment in putting the time into Hangouts, and it's not just in terms of the technical piece, but also your work, Sue, in terms of composing and being confident in the pieces that you're going to play, and on all the practice that you have to have. A lot of people host Hangouts and they haven't got monetization in mind. So as an example, in terms of this Hangout, anybody can watch it for free. I've decided that's the way I want it to be. It's not, you don't have to give an email to be able to actually participate in terms of seeing this content. And that's an approach that I've taken, and many people take a similar approach.
Yeah.
But you are investing significantly more resources. I mean, there's clearly a resource in terms of the financials and what you've had to invest over the last number of months as you've been progressing with the quality of your content. Now, clearly, not everybody may have the ability to do that, and not everybody may want to do that at this point in time. But there's also the time that you put into every show as well. How do you measure the success of a Hangout on Air? And I'm talking about beyond the number of people who watch and beyond the fact that people say, "You are wonderful, Sue. We love the show." What's the return on investment? I'm probably talking to yourself as well, Phil, here, because you're a marketer. You do this for a living for your clients. What would make you say, "We're going to stop doing this because we're not seeing this return"?
I think we're a long way off that at the moment, because she, as brand awareness, if we think of Sue as a brand, as a brand, then the Hangouts On Air, and I think the real turning point for us was when Christine de Graaf invited us all to do the Aston family show. And I have to say, and I know Christine's out there somewhere, I was fairly dubious about this event in some respects, because I was so focused on Dan's show and Sue's show and learning what I do, that I saw it as a bit of a not a hindrance, but I thought, oh God, it's something else that it's another hurdle I've got to jump over. I was a bit worried about it, and also because we weren't promoting it or hosting it. It was a third party doing it, and I thought, I don't feel in control of how this is going to pan out. But what happened at the end of that, with the fact that how it got multiple shares around the world, and the hundreds of people that watched it, and then the show was re-edited, and we did like a follow-up show the next week. It showed me the power of this is going to work, because there is nothing else we could think of that could advertise Sue Aston's music although there's the time element, this wasn't like Facebook advertising or promoting a tweet or pay-per-click on Google. This was Google Plus, and to me it seemed like a fantastic return on investment. We do a show, we don't have to travel very far, just get off the settee, the other end of the room.
That's quite hard.
And although there's a bit of setting up and stuff, and then all people, and we managed to tap into different cultures and different territories within 30 minutes. And then afterwards, it's a video that continues to gain momentum, and then builds on the next one. And so for us at this point in time, that is return on investment, because it's giving us lots of ideas, and we wouldn't have thought of Patreon if we hadn't have gone down this route in the first place. We wouldn't have thought about it.
No.
And I should say, because some people watching this episode may not have actually met Christine. She's actually been with me on a completely different subject in one of my Hangouts. But if you want to follow her content around music, it's My Music Hangout. So if you search for that, you'll find My Music Hangout. And she hosts a lot of shows, and clearly Phil and Sue, that's been a great way for you to help build your audience.
I know.
Thank you, Christine, because we have someone in the US who loves what we do and is tirelessly promoting what we do, and it's like we could try and go to where we live. We could try and find a PR company and do stuff like this, but it's almost like Google Plus is like a PR company. It's got the stuff out of there, so it's given us a lot of creative ideas of what we can do next. It's made us spend a fair bit of money, but it's all been worthwhile at this point in time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about actually getting the message out. So clearly, appearing on other people's shows, building awareness has been a successful way for you to build that audience in terms of marketing and promoting your Hangouts on Air. Give us 2 or 3 other things. So if musicians are watching today, which I know there are some, what would you suggest? So having a Hangout on Air in its own right is not the only thing you need to do to make sure people know about it. What's the top 2 or 3 things that you'd recommend somebody new to using Hangouts on Air for their music business should do?
Well, I think you need to have a high presence on social media. You need to keep telling people what you do and support others, and that's the main thing. I think you have to engage with people and support them and find people you've got common interests with. I think, wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, and I would also suggest the following, which might seem a bit odd, but when you traditionally, as a musician, play live, you turn up at a venue, you get on stage at 9 o'clock and you play your tunes, and maybe after the 3rd song you say, "Hi, my name's Phil. This next song is called blah blah blah," and then off you go and you play your tune, then you do another one. You can't do that on a Hangout on Air. It is not going to work. When we started off these Hangouts on Air, we kept them to 20 minutes, and we had 3 tunes, and then gaps in between for chat and conversation and a bit of getting to know the musician. It was put together strategically like that. They're now 30 minutes long, but that's it, because it's not the same. You don't just play your set and then wave goodbye. It's all about interactivity. It's about people want to get to know you. They want to know your story, and then they listen more, and then they share more. We've noticed that, haven't we? The shows that have the cakes and the art and the music and the guests are the ones that have like the magic touch, really.
Well, I think it's because it's all the things I'm interested in, and it's just like having friends round, but having more friends in different places, isn't it? And it just makes it fun.
Yeah, we're not trying to pretend we're anything other than in the Aston's lounge. It's not pretending to be on a makeshift stage with a green screen. It's like as if you've been invited round for a cup of tea.
Yeah, and everyone can come round for a cup of tea if they want.
Yeah.
I mean, I know when I'm thinking about shows that I've been to, like music events, and then the musician has told you a little bit about their life story, or some of them. I'm so old now. Some of the names I'm frightened to even tell you who I've been to see. People may or may not remember them. People like Dean Friedman.
Oh yes, yeah.
Remembers him in terms of Well said the rocking chair and others. Yeah. But when people like him have come back on the scene later, and then they tell you what they've been doing in the last 20 years or 15 years of their life, and some of us are interested in that, and then they meet you at the bottom of the stairs because they decide it's a small venue, so they're going to do a little signing. It's so exciting. It's that the ability to have that connection, and that's why I build this as being kind of a backstage pass. I mean, people don't often get to find out some of the things that you've been talking about today. It may not be of interest to some people, but I know it is of interest to a lot of people who are here today because they're genuinely interested in what makes your shows happen, what makes it special, and there's lots of magic that takes place as well.
I think the other thing is that although they're quite short shows, there's hours of work that goes in before that happens, and afterwards you're quite tired. And I mean, that's one of the reasons they're not every week. I know we've had some people who say it'll be great if it was as a weekly, because I know with business shows a lot of people do weekly shows. I don't think you could do this.
I don't think you could with a music show,
because you've got to think of material and the planning involved, and so it isn't easy to do these things.
And you don't want to dilute it, do you?
And you could be burnt out, really. I think you have to think of, and that is part of the building the brand awareness and the strategy behind it. Each one is done, and the next one comes along, and we might do a few teaser ads on different social media platforms. But that's how it works at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, but with Patreon, my patrons will get a second half of the show. This is the new thing coming up with my next show. So the general public will see half of the show, and then there'll be a short intermission in which to get refreshments, and then patrons get a second half, don't they? And they're like in amongst us all and chatting. So that will be a new thing as well.
Yeah, so that's one of the ideas we've got, is that there'll be a special kind of show for patrons who can have access to. So Sue will play new music exclusively to them to start with, so they hear it first.
Yeah.
And requests and stuff, and question and answers and stuff. So so we're still doing the normal 30-minute show, but there'll be like an after, like coming backstage, like when you go and see a band in real life, and then afterwards you hang around the stage door to see if you can.
But it is
get
a second
close.
half
It's
concert
a second half
as well.
concert, yeah.
Because there will be.
So
music.
how is that going to work then? You're going to do a live hangout on air. People can come in for that half an hour, and then how is this actually going to work in practice? I would need to subscribe to you on Patreon.
It is,
and then Patreon. You'll send me a specific link.
So that's exactly how it works. Yeah.
That's a really, really good idea.
Yeah.
So
Hopefully.
you heard it here, guys. This is a way that musicians can actually monetize their hangouts. It's a very clever way, and getting paid to actually put that content together. I don't know if this is a recent show. I was watching some satellite TV, so I'm not sure if this is something that happened recently or not, because I can never tell, to be honest. But there was a show there with some of you might remember Lionel Richie.
Oh,
yeah.
I understand he's actually doing a new concert, and it just made me think of that when you were talking then, Sue. So I'm putting in the same category as Lionel Richie, who's still loved by so many people. And what he's done is, for this next kind of series of shows, I was just thinking that your content is so different because, as you said, you're planning each show each time because you want to put in new pieces. But he's very clever. It's obviously for his pension. He's actually going to do a show which is all his hits. He's not trying to pitch anything else. He's just going to do all his hits.
His greatest hits.
Maybe that's another model for you, Sue.
That could be, couldn't it?
Forget anything new. Go the Lionel way. It's just let's play all the big hits.
That sounds great. Go the Lionel way. Get some black leather trousers, maybe.
Let's just look at a couple of final things. I can see here in terms of lots of questions coming up. I just want to kind of go through final few questions and then come to final few thoughts from both of you. Question here is about, has the Aston family, you see, it's like the Brady Bunch, isn't it, really? Has the Aston family ever been a guest on Hangouts at a high school or college music classroom setting? Wow, that's a great idea.
It is, isn't it?
Because no, we haven't, but yes, we would. Yeah.
Yes, we would.
Yeah, we would.
I don't think any schools or colleges have ever done it, really.
I think the other thing, all of us, looking down the comment list, a lot of us on here, as you say, are all involved in watching each other's Hangouts On Air, and we feel as if we're part of part of a Google Plus family, and it's wonderfully supportive. And Lee, our youngest son, has played in front of the rock school in America, and his school has got about 800 kids in it. He's the only child in that school who has a Google Plus account. So you have to remember, in the UK, for a lot of the younger people or musicians, they're not on Google Plus. So what we're talking about, could we be invited to some of these things? A lot of people don't know what it is. It's still very, very new. I mean, our next step, I noticed that Terry Lee Britton's in the audience as well. He will like this. our next step is to use this device, which is a Focusrite Pro 40. Thanks, Terry, because this was part of your influence. Is because what we want to do is we want to record multi-track live at the same time as we do the online music Hangouts on Air, so that afterwards we can mix the tracks in case something was not quite loud enough or was too loud, and then release the soundtrack as a separate event, which we can then be for patrons or even as a live concert recording. So now, as the mastery group would say, Ronnie Binzer in particular would say that when you do a Hangout on Air, you want to shut everything down. Only have your camera and the Hangout on Air thing open. When you do music Hangout on Air, there's a lot of things open. Not only you've got your, if you're recording live multi-tracks at the same time, there's a resource for you with those high definition tracks, and you've got the Logic, your software doing it and everything else. So you have to make sure that you do lots of testing, and so that's phase 2 of 2014 for us, is to be able to record multi-track so that afterwards we can even add keyboards or other instruments onto some of the music we've done.
Yeah. So I just want to wrap up with a final couple of questions. I'm going to start with you, Sue. I want you both to answer this question. What's the one thing that you wish you had known at the beginning of this year when you were starting down this path of using Hangouts on Air that would have accelerated your success? Firstly, perhaps you can answer, Sue, and then same question to you, Phil.
What's the one thing? That's a very good question, Krishna. I would say just maybe make the shows a bit longer. I think I just had this idea that it was going to be like a very quick 10 minutes, wasn't I? I was like, oh, I'll just play a tune and then maybe another one, that'll do. But I think, yeah, you do have to realise that it's not like an ordinary concert or appearing on someone's music show on the radio or something like that. It is interactive, which is great, and I love that side of it. So, yeah. Make the shows longer and include plenty of chat, because that's where the fun is, I think.
I think that my answer to that would be, what could I have known? I wish I'd have known what I know now then, because I think one of the, apart from Terry and Tom Rolfson, and even they, will admit to say at the beginning of the year, have you tried maybe just overlaying the audio on the video after you've done it? Because there was nobody in the world, and normally when you Google anything, I always say to my kids, whatever you've got a problem, Google it. There'll be someone somewhere in the world who's got the same issue as you, and you'll be able to find an answer. When I was trying to set up getting the sound right for musical Hangouts on Air, there was no response. There was nothing out there. So I think it's fantastic that here we are in the end of September, and now there are people talking about how to do musical Hangouts, because at the beginning of the year there was just silence. There was really no one really wanting to go near it, or if they had, they had such a terrible experience, they didn't want to go there again. So David Sant is another guy that knows a lot about sound on Hangouts on Air. So I think it's just time, really.
So I should just say, for anybody watching this event and you're not looking at it on the event page, the name that was mentioned there was Terry, and just so you're aware, it's Terry Lee Britton. That's Leigh. So you'll find him on Google Plus, and thanks, Terry, for your contributions here in terms of on the event page as well. One final technical question for me, and then we'll come to some other kind of final thoughts for our viewers. We haven't talked about copyright. What would be the one thing you'd say to people actually using Hangouts on Air as a musician, and in terms of playing music, because clearly there is a copyright consideration when you're live broadcasting, and whether or not that content will then be heard on a replay later on. So Phil or Sue, perhaps you can talk about that.
I think because we'd already built up Sue's YouTube channel had already got like 1.5 million views, and we'd been asked to be a YouTube partner by Google some time ago. So I think, and Google knows that everything on that channel has been written by Sue, and she's recognised with everything's registered with the PRS, MCPS, everything is. So that we were safe in thinking that as long as we did original music,
it would be okay.
we will be fine. The only time we've ever had a problem is actually on the Aston family show when Lee, who was only 15, hadn't written anything of his own, and he played a cover version and they picked it up.
But that's good because it's made him write his own music.
Yeah, but it's made him write his own music.
So that was the catalyst.
So now he's written 5 tunes now.
Yeah.
But my recommendation would be do your own music.
Do it yourself.
Your own compositions, but register them. You have to then prove they're yours, just in case you do something that's actually popular and someone else copies it. There has to be a way of referencing it back to a music library somewhere that you came up with it first.
Yeah. Excellent tips. Now, just as we close off today's episode, I know there are some people here who are going to be interested in learning more about your music and learning how to watch those private viewings of your shows. And Phil, I know there's going to be some people who say, wow, that's so technical, I need some further coaching advice, consulting from you. So perhaps, Sue, you can start first about how people find out more about your Patreon shows, and Phil, then you can talk about how people can get in touch with you if they're looking for consulting and guidance about, how to produce Hangouts on Air for either for themselves as musicians or for people in their organisation or their friends and family.
Yeah, so please go to my website, sueaston.com, or go straight to Patreon and search for me. That works as well.
Patreon.com/Sue
Aston, and that will give you all the information you need for all those special musical goodies that will be coming your way.
And if you want to get in touch with help on any of this, you can go to our main business website, which is geniusloci.co.uk, and I'll drop a link into the comment stream afterwards in case you can't remember that or spell it even.
So just in terms of kind of finishing this part of the show, I always like, as people know, to kind of wrap this up and get to start to think about what does this mean. I really appreciate that Phil and Sue have been with us and dedicated their time to this show. I know some of you here produce other shows, and perhaps you're looking at this. Some of you are here because you're fans of Sue and you just can't get enough of her. Some of you might be able to put her in contact with actually doing events in schools. What a great idea, or colleges, and actually broadcasting across the world into colleges and part of the music curriculum, maybe even talking about how she composes her own music and lots of things. I can imagine there also being the mum of 3 daughters who play musical instruments too. So my question for you today, as always, is there something that you could do to adapt or apply one thing that you've learned today? You've invested so much time with us, as well as Sue and Phil investing time. We would love to know what that is. Please let us know. Leave a comment. Come back to us in a year's time, whatever it might be. I know we'd both, I should say all 3 of us would love to know if there's something that today has inspired you to do, to think about, or even to share. So we really appreciate that. If you've got specific questions about using Google Hangouts in your organization and you want to spend a little bit of time with me, you'll find I'm listed over at Helpout. So if you go to helpoutsformarketing.com, you'll find my listings over there. But that's it for today's episode. I hope you'll join me the next time. I know today was a little different in terms of the kind of businesses that we're looking at using Hangouts, but I hope this adds to the mix. There's lots of great ideas that I think we can all adapt and apply from some of the things that Sue and Phil have talked about us today. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope to see you on the next episode of the Visual Content Marketing Show.